life is uncertain, and life is, as much as we try and put a plan in, and we talked about planning some time ago, things will always go not as planned, and we've got to be agile, and I think we've got to be have that emotional, I suppose, strength to manage that.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello, Julian. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
Good to see you, Damian. Yes, it has been a while. I don't know how long, but it's time just seems to be going so quickly at the moment for me. But yeah, it has been a while.
Yeah, it's the same. So much has happened and so many things are just building on itself. And part of that too, when things change and evolve, what we're talking about today, you mentioned about talking about strength and mental and physical and emotional strength. When things evolve so much, I know from my perspective, same token, in the pre-show I was talking about how many things have happened. And it does require a bit of strength to go, okay, we're stepping out into that uncomfortable zone. And how do you maintain that? Is that something that you've experienced, and how do you find that strength to keep going when you're not sure it's all going to work out?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, strength, isn't it? And I think life is tough, and we need to be strong on all those counts we just talked about, mental, physical, emotional strength, because things are coming at our way all the time. And I know for myself, it's, I suppose, building in a sense of, I call it core strength. A bit like an athlete, isn't it? When they're sort of training for a marathon, you do your runs, your long runs, you do your nutrition, you make sure you sleep well, but you also got to do that what you call core strength, which is sort of basically building, you know, um, strength in your core, in your abs, in your muscles, because that's almost like gives you that framework to sustain that long run, doesn't it? And I think often, I know when I first started doing sort of marathon running, I didn't do much of that, and that's why I probably found doing marathons quite difficult. And so I realised actually getting that core strength, and I think it's similar to life really as well. And I talk a lot about with my clients is, as much as I can help them unblock those limiting beliefs and help them really sort of go for it, develop a regular core strength, core emotional strength, core sort of resilient strength really, on a daily basis. And I think that's important because life is uncertain, and life is, as much as we try and put a plan in, and we talked about planning some time ago, things will always go not as planned, and we've got to be agile, and I think we've got to have that emotional, I suppose, strength to manage that. And so I talk a lot about helping clients to really build that on a daily habits basis, really.
So from that physical perspective, because I know from my experience, there was a period there. I remember one year I was skiing, and it was just hard work, really difficult. Get to the lunchtime, it's like, oh, do I really want to go back out again? And unless it was really, really perfect weather, I'm thinking, oh, I'm not feeling that great. I don't want to do anything. And the following year, I hadn't exercised anymore in the sense of aerobic type exercise or anything like that, but I did discover some core strength exercises, and it literally took me 5 minutes to do in the day. And so I did that, and I probably did it before we went skiing again. It was probably about 2 months, 2.5 months. I did this core strength exercise pretty much every day. A couple of days got missed, but pretty much every day. And I noticed the massive difference in my skiing. I could ski all day, went to bed, woke up in the morning. The year before, it was like, oh my God, my body sore. And then this year, not this particular year, but the year that happened when I was doing that core strength exercise, I woke up and I was feeling really good. And it was only a very, very short amount of exercise that I did do that. And then recently I've discovered mobility exercise as well, which is about strengthening your joints. And that, because I had a bit of a sore lower back, and probably because I wasn't exercising and stretching enough, I'm not very flexible. So that probably doesn't help. And then I started doing some lower back stretching exercises and some mobility exercises. And again, took about 10 minutes a day to do, so very, very short. But it changed things dramatically from the perspective of what I could do overall. That's physical health. What I'm gleaning from what you were saying there is you're talking about core strength from a mental and emotional side of things. Was I picking up right there?
Yeah, no, too. I mean, the core strength is important, and I think we often forget about our physical bodies. We get caught up with the mental and emotional. And I, you know, continue to do, I do aerobic exercise. I do, weights and stuff like that at the gym, because I think, certainly when you get into my age, you need to keep that strength, and I feel, reasonably strong, and I think that's good, because our muscles start to get a little bit weaker as we get older in that sense, and so I think it's to keep that strength. So in the physical sense, I think it's important.
I can relate to your age too. I'm just,
yeah. Well, I'm compensating with this below me.
If I could, I would, but
but yeah, in terms of that mental, emotional strength, and this is, and I've discovered this probably in the last few years, really, which and I've got a real focus on sort of building resilience within people, within teams, and that's the same thing, really. It's developing this core framework that will sustain you when shocks come to your way. Things go wrong, things don't happen as they expected, and we need to be able to take that shock. And for me, it's putting in practices that really help. And this is just as you did your 5 minutes a day core strength and flexibility exercises. This is something. It just doesn't take much of your time. I think this is where people think it takes a lot of your time. I think the things I do is I would, in the morning, I wake up, and well, when it's in the winter, I will get myself in a cold tub of water.
I know you told me about that.
Which is one aspect of what I do, but just outside, I'll come back to that. But outside that, I do what we call practice gratitude, and there's a lot of talk about gratitude, and I think people see it as a bit of a woo-woo thing and all a bit sort of out there, and I'm not a woo-woo type of person. I'm quite sort of science-based, and in that sense. And what I like about the gratitude piece, this is where you're just either verbally speaking out, which is what I do because I find it easy that way, or you're thinking, or you're writing or journaling, however you do it. Just being grateful for those. It could be small things, big things, doesn't matter what it is. It could be, I'm grateful today I can breathe. It could be that as big as that, or it could be, I'm grateful that I've got a roof above my head. Doesn't matter what it is. You just think of those things. But what happens physiologically is by being grateful, and then there's research, medical research into this, is you release serotonin and dopamine. And those two neurotransmitters are basically those feel-good transmitters. So it makes you feel good. It orientates your brain to a more positive outlook on life. So if you put more gratitude in the morning, you are setting yourself up for seeing opportunities, be more positive, and making yourself feel good. And I think that's a cool way of start my day. Have a coffee, do some gratitude. When I'm in the winter, I go into a cold water. That gets even amplified because I'm sitting in this cold water, shocking my body, and that's doing all sorts of things. Mentally giving me clarity, but also that's heightening my dopamine. They say going in cold water, anything below 15 degrees will give you a hit of dopamine that's equivalent to snorting cocaine.
Oh wow!
But will be sustained over about 2 or 3 hours. So I find when I do my
And the gratitude
Um,
kicks in when you get out as well.
yes, indeed. And so I find my mornings are absolutely, just so clear. I'm so positive and so focused on things because I've got this dopamine rushing around me, and I feel good, and it starts to create this sort of framework and core of life. And I think these things are all about it's daily habits. It's being habitual about these things. It's not about fads or going at it for a few weeks. It's trying to create a habit. And some people say, well, how do you get into a sort of daily habit? Well, you build a habit on an existing habit. So if you have a coffee every day, most people wake up and have a coffee, some people don't, or you have a glass of water, whatever you do, you've created a habit already there. And that's probably a positive habit, is then you just build the new habit on it. So, okay, I have a coffee, I'm going to sit on my chair, I'm going to write some things I'm grateful for, 2 or 3 things. And you just build upon it. And as you do it, that'll just link and become a habit for you.
So is it about having that intention to build the habit and just going, this is, I want something different. If you don't want anything different, you're not going to do anything different. But I'm guessing it from that perspective, you want something different. And what I'm trying to understand is this whole emotional and mental core strength exercise, I'm going to call it. And is that, we could put the gratitude, writing out a little journal or even saying it, would that fall into that category? Because you're right, and we know that the dopamine and serotonin is produced when you have a happy thought. You don't even have to do anything happy; you just have to have that thought. I remember I did an exercise where I was walking down the street, and I tried. I don't know if I did or not, but I said I'm going to keep a straight face, but I'm going to wish the person coming towards me, whoever they are, really well, and just think happy thoughts to them. And and I don't know if I was giving it away on my face or not. I was trying to keep it as straight as possible, but I was wishing them well. And often when they looked at me, they would just smile. So then I'd smile back. But I was just wondering from that perspective, is it as simple as doing little exercises that they could be the core strength type exercise of building that resilience?
Totally. I think the reason why that makes you, having all the serotonin and dopamine helps you from a core strength point of view is that we're naturally biased towards the negative. It's a survival instinct that we're created, and so we have this bias that is more negative, and so that's why a lot of people do quite easily go into the negative spiral because we've got a bias, unfortunately, and it's like a survival thing. So if you're orientating your bias to more positive, when things do happen, because they will happen, and this is not about, and I don't like this, I'll think positive thoughts and I'll just amble through it type of thing and la 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 and that world of sort of make believe. I'm not talking about that. Is that when you get a challenge hits you, if you've orientated yourself to more positive thinking, and you will start to see opportunities as opposed to just the negative of that challenge or the difficulty. You start to see solutions. You start to be more creative. You start to see what is possible because you've got more of a positive. So it helps you navigate that difficulty, and it's less impact because you think, okay, this is a challenge. Okay, how can I navigate it? What are the options? What way can I get around this? How can I embrace and ask for help and to help me to get around this? Oh, I can see something there. Actually, I can turn this into more of an opportunity as opposed to. So it orientates your mind to that way of thinking, and it gives you a track that makes you more solution focused, more positive, more overcoming, as opposed to spiraling into, oh no, this is in my way. What am I going to do? I can't do anything about this. This is terrible. It's just stop me here, and I'll just focus on this problem and I can't get anywhere else. And I think that's what the gratitude or creating a more positive biased in your brain at the start of the day than having this natural negative bias that we have.
And from that perspective as well, because it seems, when we're in that moment of stress, and we were talking in the pre-show about the few things that happened for me during the week, which were quite emotionally draining. Very, very emotionally draining. And when we get into those moments, and I'm just wondering, because what I did from that perspective, it was extremely, not stressful, but it was just, very emotionally draining. And even though things went well, at the end of it, it was very, very exhausting. And And I'm wondering from that perspective, when we have those moments, because what I did was I acknowledged it. I went, okay, I'm feeling this. My body is now drained. All that adrenaline from going through that experience is gone, and I'm feeling quite drained. And rather than saying, oh, I shouldn't do that or shouldn't, I just went, okay, I know I'm drained. I just need to rest. I need to take that time out. And it actually took a couple of days to actually work through that. But I wasn't trying to fight against it. I wasn't trying to say, oh, I should be upbeat. I should be super motivated. I still did a lot of stuff, but it was exhausting to do that. And I'm just wondering, is there something in that acknowledgement of going, okay, this is what I'm actually feeling, and that's okay. And I just need to go through that process and I'll come out the other side, rather than trying to fight against it and saying, oh, I should be feeling different.
I totally agree. I think that's where this whole positive thinking becomes incredibly toxic,
Mm,
because it means you can't be unhappy, you can't be tired, you can't be, oh, this is hard work. You've got to be rah, 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 keep going. And it becomes a real toxic sort of way of thinking. And you see this a lot on, whether it's on various social media platforms, of how you overcome things, and whatever you're doing, we can get through this. And there's all this rah rah positivity and everything, and that's great, but it becomes toxic. And I think for me, it's I lost a big client last year, and it was quite a blow to my business in terms of what was happening, and it was pretty tough. And yes, oh, I'm resilient. I can get through this. I can rah 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 it, and we can do this. But what I did, yes, I was disappointed, and it was, and it's, I think it's good to express those emotions and difficulties, and I found that really hard. And it's like, oh, this is rubbish. It's not great. Okay. And I think it's good to get it out. That's okay. That's fine. Because if you bottle it all up, it will come out at some point anyway.
mm,
But then what I then tend to do is, instead of being all rah rah, is then, okay, I look for the wisdom in that moment. So I ask
mm,
myself, what is the wisdom at this point? This has happened. I can't do anything about it. I'm no control over that, but I've got control how I think, how I respond now. And I ask for the wisdom, and that might be think about something differently. It might send me on a different path, and I think that's the way to start think it differently, and making more, looking for the opportunity in it. And so I always ask for the wisdom, and I tell a lot of my clients, if you come up against something's difficult, just what's the wisdom in it?
mm,
What's it telling you? Why is that? Why has that come up now? Is it because you've done something you shouldn't have done, or you've not done something properly, or whatever reason that's come up? But actually, it's giving you an opportunity to think differently about a situation or a different
mm,
perspective. What's the wisdom in that moment? And I think we need to stop a bit more sometimes and think about things, rather than trying to race through life, trying to overcome things, and just think, okay, let's just pause for a moment. I remember going back, 3 years ago, wasn't it? It's a pandemic season,
mm.
and it all kicked off. The whole lockdowns and everything else, and everybody was understandably all thinking, "What on earth's going on? The world's ending," and it
Yeah.
was pretty bad. Although we seem to not remember that so much now, but it wasn't great. And I remember talking to people, and it was just awful. And I
Mm,
just thought, okay, I'm not entirely sure what to do here, because I've never been here. Well, none of us have never been here, so nobody knew
yeah.
how to do this. And so I just took 3 days out. I thought to
Mm,
myself, I'm not going to make any decisions on my finances, on what I do, how I go about things. And I took 3 days out. I did lots of walking. So we're allowed to go out and walk. Um, and I just asked for the wisdom at that point. And then after those 3 days, I'd calmed down a little bit. I was accepting the situation, realized what was going on. And I started thinking, okay, this is what I need to do to protect my finances. This is what I need to do to protect my business and personally. And I started to then map out, and I did it in a quite much more calmer, reflective way, rather than
mm,
trying to go, "Oh, I need to do panic," because yes, it was a crisis, but I didn't have to act there and then. So I purposely took 3 days. I said to myself, I'm not going to do anything, act until 3 days later. And it gave me, I'm sure I could have made other decisions that were possibly better, but at the time they were the right decisions. But I felt I made some decisions that really helped me get through that. Yes, it was still tough, still impacted my business, but I think I set myself up in a better way of modeling how to handle that sort of crisis and not getting too caught up with the emotion of it all as well.
So that taking that time out, because that reminds me of a friend of mine. He's a 7th Dan black belt, and he has 5 Ds for dealing with conflict, which is similar to what you were talking about there, a stressful situation. And the first one is distance. Put some distance between yourself and it. And I'm wondering from that perspective, as you were talking, I was thinking my experience this week was that right afterwards, I mean, I was flat, I was exhausted, it just finished and all the adrenaline is gone. And I needed to catch up with some people, have some business discussions, things like that. And I said to them, I gave them, and I didn't want to talk about it. I'm not, I know they say men should talk, but I need my space to go through it before I'm going to talk about it. But I was right there, and I just said, look, I gave a very, very brief overview and said, okay, I know I'm not going to be my normal bubbly self here, but I'm just letting you know. And they said, yeah, no problem. And I found that really helped from my perspective as well, being able to just say, and that's what I come back to, that owning it, acknowledging that's what you're feeling, and being able to express that to others. I found that gave me a sense of peace because they understood what was going on. They didn't have the detail, and they weren't, well, whether they needed it or not, I don't know. They weren't going to get it because I wasn't going to talk about it. But I explained, this is my situation. And then we did some other things, and we talked about, some other stuff that was completely unrelated. We had a bit of a laugh, and it was actually a bit of a lift up at times. And, for a little bit there, the energy came back a little bit, then went down again, and it was all okay. And I'm just wondering, do we give ourselves a little bit too much pressure by when we're in those situations, having a perception of how we think other people should view us, and then compound it by then adding further stress by trying to project something that we're not feeling at the moment?
I think we do. I think, and you're a positive guy, and you're successful at what you do, and there's a feeling of, oh, I have to maintain that image, don't I? I have to sort of keep that going. And Damian's always doing well, and he's always positive, he's always going for it, and all that. And there's this sort of pressure, isn't there, to actually to perform in a sense to that sort of the narrative or stereotype. And I think this is where I think increasingly we need to be a lot more real with ourselves. I think sometimes we try and dupe ourselves into thinking we're not really at times, but other people. But what comes with that, it's vulnerability, isn't it? That's what it is. You are being vulnerable, basically.
I didn't recognize that. That's interesting.
And I think that's that. And I think, vulnerability in itself is a strength, which sounds a bit like that doesn't make sense, but actually it is, because you're showing your not your weakness, but your sort of your underbelly side of things, and which you perhaps don't often show. And I think people see you for who you are, because when you show your underbelly, you're showing that, do you know what, you're human. You know what, you do have concerns, you do sometimes worry, you do have issues, and you do have difficulties, and you do have emotions. And I think it's the human side that comes out. And I think that's where sometimes vulnerability can be like a dirty word, particularly with men. And I just say, reframe it as in it's an opportunity to show that you're human, and by showing that you're human, people will engage with you more, people will be there for you more, people will connect with you more, and you'll be more relatable. And when they're in a difficult situation, they're more likely to reach out to you to help them, support them, because they know that you're human and you're vulnerable as well. And I think that's really important to demonstrate. And I say with it, and as a strength, and I think men find it probably more difficult to be that vulnerable. They feel like they need to be the protector, the fighter, the hunter, and all that sort of stuff. And actually, at times, it's okay. I'm not talking forced vulnerability. I'm talking genuine saying, I'm really finding this difficult. I get my clients become incredibly vulnerable, particularly the men. Initially they're a little bit like, bit of ego, bit of alpha male, and bit of the protective self. But after a couple of sessions, I create an environment that they feel safe to be vulnerable, and I'm not going to judge them. And then they'll share their difficulties, their troubles, the things they're really struggling with, and I think that's really where the sort of gold comes, where the magic stuff happens, where the things really start to take off, because they're peeling away that sort of layers and start to see who they really are, and then how can we build that for them for their future.
Because it's interesting from that perspective where you talk about vulnerability. I don't see it as vulnerable. When I was looking at what I was doing, I saw it as, this is what I need to do. And the people that I'm around, my attitude was, if how I need to be right at this moment doesn't work from you, well, I'm happy to go, was my attitude. And if you're upset by that, then you can F off, that was my attitude. It was like, this is what I need to do. This is what I'm going to be. And I'll take either one. If it doesn't work for you, then I'm happy to leave. And from that perspective, if you don't like me because of it, then our friendship's not really worth much, was how I approached that. But I was looking at it too from the perspective of, it's still, even though it was really, there was a lot, it was quite exhausting. I never saw it as a bad day. I saw it few days. I saw it as awesome. I thought there was a lot of things that happened. Yes, it was challenging. I had to push into new areas. I had to find a whole bunch of growth. And in that, I'm looking at it going, well, that's pretty cool. I'm exhausted from that, but it felt like, you using that sports analogy you mentioned about running a marathon, and I've run, not a full one, but half marathons. And after that, it's exhausting, but you feel a sense of accomplishment. And that was probably the analogy that I put in that. And maybe that was linking to that gratitude component where I'm going, actually, this is pretty cool. I got through that. And I did a good job. Could I do it better? There was areas I look at and go, yeah, I could do better. And I thought about that and pondered that. But in those moments, you do what you can do. And I was wondering, because one thing I took on board a long time ago, because they talk about positive and negative and think positive, and you're mentioning about that and how that can be toxic. And I agree with that. It can be, if you're always going, I've got to find the positive in this. And so if you've got to find the positive in it, it assumes there's a negative. And I remember when I was at drama school, at a friend that was, or the teacher who was a friend, became, we did a fair bit of Shakespeare. And I remember from Hamlet, wrote about nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. And I was pondering that for a long time. And I was wondering, what if, rather than trying to find the good in something that happens, which assumes that when something doesn't go to plan, it's a bad thing, I just said, what if it is? It's just an event. And all I've got to do is be clear about where I'm going and go, okay, how do I use this to get where I'm going, rather than it's good or bad. And I found that process made it really much, much easier for me to actually go, those last few days, they were pretty awesome. I was exhausted, but like that end of the marathon, I've had time to rest and recuperate. I recognized, because after running a marathon, you don't jump up and go, okay, I'm going to run another marathon. You go, hey, I need some rest. Is that, from that perspective, from a mental side of things, does that analogy work? It seems to, from my end, it seems to work, but I'm just wondering, is that more global, or is there more to that? Or
I think so. I think what we've got to recognize here, when you're doing building, whether it's resilience or mental resilience, and you're exercising it in a sense, the same principle as training for a marathon, you will get tired with it. And I know this is a good thing. And often my clients, in fact, one of my clients said yesterday, my head sometimes is sore after our sessions, Julian, because I've really challenged her thinking and got to do exercise in her brain, and we're exercising her brain as much as anything else. And I had another client who said the same, and I think when we're in when you're in a stressful situation or a period of growth, that your brain is doing things you've never done before, or in situations never before, there's some element of exercise mentally, and that is tiring, that's exhausting, and that's where rest is important and sleep is important, and talk about the core of the sort of mental emotional strength. Sleep and rest are as vital as anything else, really. And I think again, it's another thing that we forget about, is that you need to have time to sleep, so your brain goes through the various processes it does in the night to sort itself out, process, and without all the stimulation of the day and what's been going on there. And then resting is not just a physical thing. There's a physical aspect to it, but also there's a brain thing to it, and looking for ways to, I guess, rest your brain, be more mindful, be more in the moments, often rather than racing ahead into the future, which we often do, which drives anxiety, or thinking about the past, that things we should have done, which makes us incredibly depressed. But getting more in the moments, and and as we get more in the moment, any mindfulness exercise of whatever you do, yoga, various other ways of accessing mindfulness, is you connect more to your logic brain, your prefrontal cortex, and it takes away from the amygdala, the midbrain, which is the sort of fight or flight parts, and so you become more relaxed, more at peace. Your brain thinks it's in the moment, therefore you can control things. It feels at peace and is a better place to be. And I think then we start to think clearer as well, because when you're racing ahead, you don't have time to think. And that's a little bit what I did with that. Take your friend distancing. There's a little element of creating that distance. I took 3 days out post the sort of pandemic lockdowns to create those moments to sort of almost rest and be in a place of thinking clearer, because I wanted to be in a place of rest rather than a place of stress. Because when you're stressful, you don't make the greatest decisions, and it's best not to make decisions when you're stressed or late at night, all those sort of things. We all know that. And so take time out. So I think, we need to endeavor to, think about the rest and the sleep for our brains, not just our physical side. And that's another, I suppose, a core framework of building that mental and emotional strength.
I love that. There's many times I've written an email late at night, and then I thought, I'll wait till the morning. And then I've gone, I won't send that one. I'll do something different.
So text, whether it's having a bickering with your friend, ex-part, whatever it is, don't do it late at night. Don't make decisions. If you ever thought, okay, I'll look to the morning, you wake up in the morning and go, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to build upon that, and this is what I'm going to do instead. No, I think got to be careful how we make decisions, when we make decisions, I think.
Is part of that listening to your body? Because I know from my perspective, because you mentioned about stress, and we don't think well when we're stressed. So if your body's tired, I mean, that's a stress. And is it, because often I'm listening going, okay, I noticed, and that was the thing the past few days, I noticed I was tired, and I even got to the point yesterday, which I rarely get. I had this massive, brain was sore. It was physically, and I don't have that very often. And I noticed it, and I had things to do, and I wanted to get done. I had some interviews to have and things like that, so I wasn't going to put it off, and I did it, and they come across really well. But it was forcing through that. But then I stopped and took some time out and just rested and gave myself. It's been a couple of days, and I can feel my body now is back to where it needed to, where it was beforehand. So I'm in that. But is it a case of, I noticed that in my body and go, okay, actually I've been pushing really hard here. I need to slow down a little bit, and I'll consciously do that. I'll make that effort to go, okay, there's a couple of meetings that I was going to plan. I'll move them, or I'll jiggle things around just to give me that little bit of time. And I guess that's probably sounds like it's putting that distance between it. But how do you pay attention to your body, or do you pay attention to that, and how do you incorporate that into your life so that you get that balance?
Yeah, I know when I go into, it is an important point. I think it's listening to our body, listening to our brains, listening to how we feel, and thinking what's going on. I think, and that takes time to do that, and almost a stillness sometimes. What I tend to do is, there's two things. It's I on a weekend, I'll think about, usually a Sunday evening, my week, what's going on in the next week or two. And so I think about the aspects of where I potentially see some pressure points of time, of where my either physically or my brain. And so I'm aware that Thursday, I've got a busy day, I've got a number of clients, I've got this, and I'm going out in the evening, da da da. So I know there's a pressure point. So I think, okay, what can I do prior to that and after that to sort of so I'm almost preempting. It might be okay, but I'm just preempting my week of all right. I'm out Monday night. I'm out Tuesday night. I've got a long drive on Wednesday. Okay, I'm going to make sure I get some good sleep. I'm going to make sure I go to bed early, or I take Thursday a little bit slower in the morning. So I try and plan my week and look at my week and think what's going on. So that's almost like preemptive type of stuff. What I also found when I was doing the cold water, I have cold showers now every day because cold water outside is about 18 degrees, so it's not really cold because we're in the summer here in the northern hemisphere. And
I get that from time to time in the shower because I'm in the shower and then someone turns the hot tap on.
Well, I deliberately do that. But what I find, even with the cold shower, but certainly when I was going in the cold water every day, it was a really good way of me understanding where I'm at that point in time. So I get in the cold water and I go, and sometimes I feel like, oh, this is brilliant. And I think, I feel strong today. I feel that sense of inner strength for what some days I'd feel a bit more, this is more difficult. And I feel a bit more sort of, not weak in a sense, just feel a bit more fragile.
Yeah.
And so I used to find it's almost like a dipstick to me. It gave me a sense of, okay, I don't feel great today. Why is that? And then I'd explore that, and I think, okay, oh yeah, I had a long day yesterday, or I'm perhaps a little bit anxious about this, and I start to explore it, and then I start to think, okay, what can I do to help that physically, mentally? Is it just going for a walk? Is it going for a run? Is it going to the gym? Do I need to make sure I drink plenty of water? Do I just need to just rest? Actually, what I'm going to do today, I've got a few hours. I'm just going to sit and watch TV or something, watch a film or something, just to sort of chill out and just not think about anything to do with work or something, get lost in a film or something. And so I regulate that way and look for ways. And I think we've got to find ways to listen to our body and to see what's going on. And I say my cold water was my little test every day. 2 minutes in and I get a readout almost of how I feel and where I am. Sometimes I think, this is great, I'm on it. And then sometimes I think, I don't feel so great today. And then I explore it. Yeah. But it's exploring it and it's asking yourself questions.
I love that you remind that, and I've got this future. How we have they say about this future vision, what it's going to be like in the future, and I'll get to a bit more detail about that. But on the cold water thing, every time that happens to me in the shower, when I'm in the shower and someone turns the hot tap and it goes cold, and I think, I'm going to do what Julian does. I'm going to get there. So I was like, I know the benefits and I understand the science behind why you're doing that, and it works, and it is invigorating because that happens, and it's like, it's cold, and it's like, and then I go, okay, enjoy it, and it's like, and I'm feeling invigorated. It's like, can you please turn the hot tap off and then I can get my water back? But from that perspective, though, when we're in those times of being transitions, you mentioned about how you lost that big client, and I've had that similar situation too, where there's been a transition, and all of a sudden how you thought things were or how things were consistent. You might have a consistent income. There was times when I've had a consistent income coming in, and then something's changed and I don't have that anymore, and all of a sudden I've got to do something different. And that's again, we're moving into that stress situation because you're going, how am I going to support this? How am I going to take care of things? And I've found it's a case of finding in my mind, just shifting that focus, going, this is how my life is going to be now going forward. And I've found that that's not an effort, because people talk about, an effort. You've got to, what's the word? Not resilience. You've got to have keep trying. I can't remember the word. I'm a mental blank there. But this resilience where you've got to keep fighting and moving forward and trying really hard to get there. And what I've found from my perspective is that shift of when I started to feel that stress in my body, I'd think, oh, what am I going to do? Is this going to work out? I would then consciously go to a state of thinking about what that new outcome looked like. I'm going to get new sales this way. And I'd have that process, and I'd think through it and know that, if I sent out X amount of cold emails to qualified, when I say qualified, prospects that would fit what I'm offering, I'd know that I'd get a certain amount of responses back, and from that I'd be able to convert a certain amount, and then that would take care of it. And it was just whenever that stress come up, it wasn't a physical effort to actually do that. It just became a shift in mindset, and all of a sudden my body started to relax. It was, I'm worrying about what's going to happen in a sense of I'm not going to be able to afford something. Where am I going to get the income from? Then I go, no, actually, what I'm going to do is this, and this, and that'll result in that. And all of a sudden, I'll be relaxed, and actually, I'd see other things that I wouldn't see before, because in a state of stress, you don't notice things. Is that, from your perspective, when you think about that time and other times you've been through, was that something that you used, or what other things did you use to help reduce that stress and give you that mental strength as well?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think we get caught up with we set goals, we set objectives, however you want it, outcomes. But the fact of life is we're not really in control of those. We are to a certain extent. I'm not saying we that's why we
like the
shouldn't set
Force.
goals.
I watched Star Wars. You kind of control it, it controls you.
So, and I think we get so caught up with trying to control things. I've set, I want to have X number of clients, all this sort of stuff. I'm not saying we don't do things that create that. Like you've got, you send so many emails, you get a very funnel all the way through, and there's a predictability there. But generally, we're not in control of that. And I think the moment we realise that's weirdly quite liberating. Doesn't mean you don't set any goals or aspirations, and it doesn't mean you don't work towards things. But it takes the pressure off, because often stress is, in essence, is caused by you getting frustrated because you can't control something. That's what stress is. You get angry, frustrated, and you can't control it, and therefore you get stressed. And because you get stressed because you can't control it, and so the moment you realise you can't control stuff, then so it's then going back to control the controllables, isn't it? Which is what you do on a daily basis, which is who you are. And going back to that time I lost that client, as much as it is stressful and frustrating at times, and I was like, what am I going to do? You have that moment of blackness and darkness, and the world's ended, and it's all going to be terrible and everything else. And that's okay. That's okay to feel like that. It's fine. It's an emotion. But I have no control over it. I can't control that. What I can control is how I respond, how I react, and what I do next. For whatever reason they decided not to. I know other reason they did it, but I couldn't. Yes, I might try and persuade them, all this sort of stuff, but I'm not in control of that. And I think the moment we realise that, the better. And I've switched to more having intentions as opposed to just having outcomes and goals. So, for example, going to a networking event, rather than going with a goal of I want to meet 3 new people and have a one-to-one with one person and get a client from it. So that's like a goal, isn't it? And that's quite stressful and when putting yourself up in some sense. But also by having that goal, when you interact with people, your brain is just seeking that goal and seeking trying to achieve that. So you will come across like that. So you'll come across that you're just hunting for 2 or 3 people new, potentially who meet your client's avatar, and therefore all you want to do is get a one-to-one. Therefore, you can sort of become a client. And so your body language, your tone, what you say, how you say it, how you interact, will feel that way. And we've all met those sort of people who are very focused on that. And so I switched to more intention. So when I go to a networking event, is I have an intention to connect with people and to see if I can help people. That's simple as that. And it takes the pressure off. So I'm not going in there with a self-imposed pressure list. I'm going in, I want to connect with people. That's really good. I like connecting with people. I like chatting to people. I like building relationships with people. I like to get to know people. I get
Can you
curious
teach me how
people.
to do that?
and I like helping people. I like, I remember I met a lady recently at a networking event, and I was just fascinated by what she was doing. She was a personal stylist. And I just asked loads of questions. I'm curious and interested, and I asked about why she does it. Because I always ask people, why you do it, what's your mission, what's the big dream? Because I just want to know the sort of what's behind it all. And we were talking about 15, 20 minutes, but she was hardly, because she didn't have a chance to probably ask me anything, because I was asking her lots of questions. I was really interested, and we connected. And then she said, "Oh no," it was sort of finished. She said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I've not had a chance to ask you. I guess talking about me." I said, "No, I was really interested." But we connected, and it's interesting because then she said, "Oh, we must catch up on." We caught up online, and then we had a conversation online a few weeks ago, and she said, "I've been really talking about a conversation we had with you." So, "Oh, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, with my friends and stuff, because you were really interested, you were curious, and then you taught me some stuff about being in the moment, da 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 da, and it just struck me," says, "that the conversation we had." I said, "Oh, okay." And now we're looking to. She wants me to work with her in September to help her. But I didn't go with that. I want to grab her. I was just fascinated. That's my intention. And yes, I could help her, and I can help a lot of people. And so, to me, I go and I enjoy it. So I went to that and I go and enjoy. I've got no pressure. I'm like, I'm just going to connect with people, see if I can help people. And more often than not, I come away with, people want to connect with me. People want to have one-to-ones, and that turns into clients. And I've made this switch probably in the last, probably more 12 months. I think I've sort of switched this way. I used to be very much get this networking and got to get clients and da 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 all this sort of stuff. And so this switch, and it's starting to be more fruitful from a business point of view. It's more enjoyable, and also what happens is I get into other things, and then people start asking me to speak at events, or could you write an article for a magazine? So other things happen that I didn't even think about as an objective, because I wasn't so focused on there just to connect and help people. And so it opens up. So it created. So it for me, that's and I now look forward to networking events and just look forward to meeting new people, get curious and interested, and that's what I do. And often the balance of conversation is I'm probably asking more questions and they're asking more about me, because just the way I am, and which is fine. And people often think, "Oh, well, we must connect, have a coffee, because I'd like to know a bit more about you," and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I love that. And I'm wondering from that perspective, when we're talking about mental and emotional well-being, strength mentally and emotionally, is part of that the shift that you just did? As you said, you went to networking events. You're originally essentially about me. How can I get a client? How can I do that? Now you go with the intention of connecting and listening to people and understanding what their issues are. And I'm likening that to, I remember when I was younger, a lot younger, and I think I've told you the story. I was sitting in my car listening to this tape about why, song that, "Why Won't Anyone Love Me?" And I'm playing it, and it's a tape, so that's showing how old I am. And playing it, rewinding it, playing it, crying my eyes out. And a couple of weeks later, I went to this event where they were had this massive marquee, and they were putting on a lunch for homeless people, where they had a special dinner. I think it was for Christmas or something like that. Maybe it was Easter, but it was making a special dinner for these people and making it really special. And I was helping out at that event, and I noticed the complete difference in my feeling towards me and my own mental well-being, because I'd shifted from, what's wrong with me, or why won't somebody help me, or it's about me to how can I help others? And I'm wondering, listening to you talk, I was wondering, was that your experience as well? That when we're looking at our own mental health, similar sort of thing, these past few days, I've spent a lot of time helping people and work communicating with people, even though they've been on guests on podcast, this podcast and the financial podcast that I have. I made sure I was making it about them, asking them about their life, their question, what's happened, and really trying to make them feel good about being on the show and being okay. And as a result, I felt good. So my mental health was much better. I'm
Mm.
wondering, is that something that we can do as well as a habit whenever we're feeling not so great? Notice whether we're thinking about ourselves or whether we're thinking
Mm.
about helping other people. Is that what you've experienced as well?
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting thing about when you help others. You forget about your own sort of
Mm,
problems generally, because you're helping somebody else.
yeah.
Um, I mean, just on that, before we talk a bit more on that, is make sure before you help others, you're in a position to yourself is important, because often we
Mm,
forget about ourselves, and I
mm,
think some people get into burnout because they're helping other people and not looking after themselves. So,
mm,
coming from a position of, you know, daily things and support yourself is
yeah.
important first. Obviously, the whole analogy, put on your gas, your oxygen mask on an airplane first before you help somebody else is a valid point. And I think,
Mm,
I think there's some people who, certainly I would say probably more females,
mm,
who get into a place where they help others, their friends, and then they end up being burnt out because they're not
mm.
looking after themselves. So yes, so I just want to make a point on that, because I think it can go the other way and be unhelpful. But
Yes.
generally, by focusing on somebody else, it sort of distracts you from your own sort of challenges and what's going on. I think also thing to think about is most people. Well, we all have a purpose. We might not
Mm,
all be aware of our purpose or have clarity on our purpose, but most people's purposes
mm,
generally is there's always something about helping others in that. There's always and
mm,
it's always bigger than you. It's not about you. I mean,
yeah.
I think that's so. Actually, when you tap into that, it's quite energizing. And when you tap into that purpose, and you might not be doing it consciously, you might be more subconsciously you're doing it. And so actually helping somebody is tapping into potentially some of your purpose, and therefore that resonates, gives you energy. It sort of stirs you, and
Mm,
therefore it creates that positivity as well. So I think that dynamic is going on, because and I know when I can be really tired, but when I get into working with my clients and I'm helping them, which is my purpose of what I do,
mm,
I'm just just loving it, and just feel energized and positive, and because I'm in the groove, I'm in that place,
mm.
regardless of what's going on before that. And so I think, and sometimes we will do this consciously or subconsciously, and so it's important to get clarity on that purpose and then look for ways of fulfilling that purpose. And usually it's something bigger than you, and it's outside of you, and it's usually something to help others in some shape or form. You may get paid for it at some point, which is fine. I'm not saying don't get paid, but
Mm.
it's certainly something that will be outside of you, and it's not about you. In essence, it's about other people.
That's where I was wondering from that perspective, having that purpose, coming back to what the word that I was lost on before was willpower, and that you reminded me of it when you were talking then, from that side of things of having your purpose. Is it, something that's really difficult to do, or is how do you, find that purpose? Because a lot of times we ask people what do they want, they don't know. And I wonder about that from that perspective. Do we need to spend this whole going soul searching thing, or can we just say in this moment, my purpose is to do this and make this person feel better? And I'm likening that to I learnt way too late in life because I was always very technical. I knew things and I could explain that, and when I was explaining something to somebody, I was always very technical about it, showing, this is why it's this way, and getting that. And what I learnt later was that people don't remember so much what you say, but how you made them feel. And for me, that became really transformative in the way I communicated, because now when I'm talking with people, more often than not, I'm thinking about how can I make that person feel good? So just in general conversation, I'm thinking
Mm.
about how to make them, or how can I help them feel good about this interaction, rather than, am I proving my point or whatever. I threw that out a long time ago now, is this whole point of trying to convince other people that your point's right, because it doesn't work in most cases. They can have their opinion, and that's okay. But I've noticed from that perspective, because my focus now is shifted to what am I doing to help make them feel better about this interaction? And a lot of
Mm.
times that's just listening and asking questions, as you highlighted from when you're out at the networking events. So it's not that difficult to do. And I was just wondering, is it really that case of, I'm trying to think of the analogy, but it was a point of, when you let go, it's just a matter of letting go, and then it all becomes very easy. And a lot of times we're fighting against it, coming back to that analogy of, I was feeling exhausted, and rather than saying, I should feel up and whatever, I just went, hey, I'm flat. I'm flat, and that's the way it is at
Mm.
the moment. I'll bounce back later. And just acknowledging and embracing that and letting go. Because you mentioned letting go before. Is it something, is that, from your experience, is that a habit that you just develop and go, hey, I'm just going to let go and be in that moment. I can't control everything. I'm just going to, I can't control that. That's happened. I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to focus on what I can do.
Yeah, I never used to be like that.
Mm.
I used to be very much slightly highly
Rah, 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 rah.
focused. Yeah, exactly. And all about hitting objectives. Why don't I get it? What can I do? Meet somebody. I come from the world of sales, and
Mm.
going into any meeting was all about highly planned, fallback plan, all that sort of stuff, negotiations, and
Mm.
we're going to achieve an objective. And I've probably in the last 3 or 4 years, I've shifted
Mm.
massively from that. And it doesn't mean I don't have a focus. Doesn't mean I'm not ambitious,
Mm.
but it's rooted in my purpose, which is far bigger than me anyway.
Yeah.
And if I fulfill my purpose, then all that stuff of finance, enjoyment, fulfillment will all come anyway. And that's it's almost that sort of catch-all in a sense. That sounds very, very sort of simple, but it is simplified. I think when we start to strive, we get in our own way.
Mm.
And striving for me, it just becomes it's trying to control things, and because that's what you tend to do when you try to strive, because you think, I want to control that, I need to control that person, need to
Mm.
do this, need to do that. And so and the energy to strive is so exhausting.
No.
And I'm not saying, and again, this is not going, oh, I just sit back and just sit on the sofa, and it's not law of attraction, and I think about my business, and it'll all come to me. I'll just sit there and just on the sofa. I take action daily on
Mm.
what I do, but I take action based on my purpose. My purpose is to unlock human potential, and
Mm.
to create sustainable, resilient organizations and people. That's what I'm about. And so, whatever I endeavor to do, talking to you is part of, linked to my purpose. That's why I talk to you. This is sharing what I do, hoping to help people tap into their human potential.
Mm.
My own podcast is exactly the same. Interviewing people who've done stuff and doing amazing things, and
Mm.
understanding their mindset, that helps people if they listen to it. So that's why I do things. Doing a master's degree in psychology, again, for me to become more honed in helping people to unlock that human potential. And
Mm.
so it's all the things I do and why I do it, to go to networking there to do that, and what I'm a business. And so it's not about striving, it's about, and therefore when things come my way and don't align to that purpose, I
Mhm.
will just go, I'm not going to do that. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. And so, even though there's an opportunity to make some money there, well, no, I'm just going to do it in a very transactional, and it'll just take that away, and it'll take energy away from me. When you do things that are purpose driven, you have energy for it, and it's inspiring. It resonates with you. It fulfills you. It excites you.
Mm.
I think of I think of a fruit tree. I mentioned this to a client recently because we started talking about striving, and
Mm.
I don't think a fruit tree strives to bear fruit.
Mm.
It's just an environment. It's got the sun. It's in water with the rain, and the fruit just grows. That's what it does. It's what
Mm.
it does. And if you're aligned to your purpose, that's what you do. You don't need to strive. It will happen. And again, it's about daily actions. You have to do things. You have to,
Mm.
I'm not saying about just sitting around. You have to take action. You have to meet the people. You have to do whatever you do. But a fruit tree doesn't go, it just sort of happens, and it'll be when it'll be in the time. It won't strive to make fruit, just to grow fruits. It just grows fruit because that's what it does. That's its purpose, to grow fruits. If your purpose to help people do this, then
Mm.
you'll do it. That's fine. That's your purpose. Why do you need to strive to do it? That's who you are. You found that. And I
Mm.
think that's what we need to get more in. And I think we often get in our own way because we're striving and striving is stressful. It really is. It takes a lot of energy.
Well, I was wondering from that perspective, as you were talking about with the striving side of things, and stress was coming to mind, and you've just mentioned that as well. When you have this objective, you want to achieve something. And I know from my experience of having done it, you want to achieve it, and it doesn't go the way you want. So you're really pushing hard to make it happen. And I'm wondering, as you were talking through that, and I was thinking back through my own experiences, that stress blocks other things from coming in, the things that you need to have. Because I know now for me, when when something doesn't go to plan, I've got an objective I want to get to, and something doesn't go to plan, I don't get stressed about it and I don't force it harder. I like you said, I think I'm being the fruit tree, um, and and I'll do something else, and I'll go off and usually when you're more relaxed, all of a sudden, um, something will pop into my head and go, there's the answer. I need to do that, and then I'll do that, and it'll work. And I've had that so many times now, and this is where I'm wondering from that perspective, this whole, and I'm sure there's some philosophy on this somewhere, that it's really that point of letting go and being clear about where you want to go, but letting go
Mm,
rather than trying to control how you get there,
mm,
being receptive, kind of like a keto, being receptive to the force that's coming in and then manipulating that to help you get where you need to go.
mm.
Um, and I feel I've got to that space, but I don't know how I got there. Because I know I used to do the striving. And now when I look at things, I don't strive so much anymore. I'm very, very, as you know, I'm very busy and do lots of things, but I'm not forcing myself to do that. I'll be working and then I go, okay, I want to do this and I'll do that. And all of a sudden it's 1:30 in the morning. I go, okay. And now my body's telling me to go to sleep. So I'll go to bed. But I don't know how I got there. So I'm wondering from your perspective, is that, something when you went through that as well, what was it the trigger that gave you that awakening that it's not about forcing harder, it's actually doing the opposite?
Yeah, I suppose similar to you, it was a journey how I got there, and I think it was getting clarity of my purpose, and then using that purpose a bit more, and because that just sort of blew objectives, goals into the distance. It just
Mm,
took them apart because it went so much higher and so much bigger,
yeah.
um, and so much more embracing. I think I started to, for me, getting. I was asking a podcast recently, what was one thing that you do now that you wish you'd known years ago?
Mhm.
And it was to be more present.
Mm,
Um, and it's a real simple thing. I was very much the individual that was, in sales, we have a goal to do X. We're
mm,
on it, right? Hit the goal, right? Next goal, move on. And I probably never really enjoyed the journey
yeah,
because I was just trying to get to the destination.
yeah.
Um, and it was my wife a few years ago said about that once. She said, "Oh, enjoy the journey, Julian." I was like, "Oh yeah, right, okay." And it made me think about what that meant, and it
Mm,
means being present because I was very much in the future.
yeah.
I wasn't a stress head, but I was certainly high sort of anxiety, of energy, of probably not helpful.
I
And so
resemble that remark.
and so I
Resembled.
started to be more present, and being more present means you don't get caught up with the future, so you're not anxious. You don't get caught up in the past because you don't get depressed,
Mm,
and you're more at peace. And when you're present with yourself, you are more aware of how you feel, how you think, what's going on, what makes you tick, what
mm,
makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad, all those sort of things. You're far more self-aware when you're in the moment and present.
mhm,
But also when you're with other people and you're fully present, you give the experience. You talked about how people experience you, how you make them feel.
mhm,
It just goes 1,000%, absolutely, because you're in the moment. You're not thinking about the next conversation. You're thinking about this conversation only, and that person, and they feel this absolutely. You're pouring everything into it because you're in
mhm.
the moment. And so I think for me that's what sort of shifted me, is to get more present, realizing what my purpose was, which was bigger than me and bigger than the moment. Which gave me the sort of the North Star direction of where I was going. So I didn't need to get too caught up on the objective, because I had this sort of intentional direction I was going, in terms of how I help people. But being in the moment started to unlock that. And then the more I got in the moment, the less I got in my own way.
Mm,
Because I think when we start going to the future, we sort of get in our own way, because we're trying to be in the moment with somebody or a situation, and then we're thinking the future. And I think we're toggling, and
mm,
it's not helpful. And so I just find, just give my all in the moment. It's all I can do. That's all I'm in control of. It's where I best perform. It's where I best give everything. Is right now. Just having this conversation with you, I'm not thinking about the rest of my day.
mm.
I've already thought about the rest of my day, what I'm doing. I'm just giving my all to you, my conversation, listening to you, hearing you, and having that conversation. And I think that was the shift for me, of being more, letting it go, getting out of my own ways, being more present. And it's not only great for that, but you experience life far better, because you savor those moments, because you're in the moment. You see it. You actually do see it. It sounds really sort of simple, but you do enjoy that journey. And whether it's a drive somewhere, or it's a business challenge, or whatever it may be, or interaction, you enjoy it. And I think that's what I try and do when I meet people, is just be in the moment. It doesn't always happen. And
Mm,
my cold water stuff helps practice mindfulness, because I think you've got to practice a bit of mindfulness and
yeah.
get comfortable being in the moment yourself, and then you'll be that with other people as well.
How have you found being in the moment has affected your productivity? Because from my perspective, and I have a program called Max Time, which helps. It's a time management, although time management is a misnomer, because time's a constant and everyone has 24 hours. So it's really the effort within that time that you manage. So really, it's effort management. But I've found, and I use my own stuff, which is ironically, I'm selling it, so I might as well use it. I created it. But I've found from that perspective, a lot of times being in the moment, when I'm doing something, I'll focus on that thing that I'm doing and I will just get that done. And because I'm focused on it, it gets done really, really quickly. I had that today. This whole day was quite. I had a meeting, and from that meeting, there was some actions to do, and it was on my actions list. And I went, I'm just going to do that now. And so I did it, and I finished it. One thing took a bit, or not long, a little bit longer than I anticipated. And I was thinking of stopping it, but I thought if I stop it, I'm going to have to pick it up again and come back to it later. So I'm in the moment here, just finish it, got it done and sent it
Mm.
off. It's all done now. I don't have to come back there. And then I actually did have time to do some exercise as well. So before we got on the podcast, it was like I jumped on the cross trainer. Did a bit of the mobility exercises, and then jumped on the cross trainer. There's a new Star Trek episode out, so I was watching that, thinking, okay, I've got to finish by this time, so I got time to cool down, have a shower, and I ended up getting a cold shower. Someone turned the hot tap on, and then be ready in time to meet with Julian. And it was all in the moment, so I got so much done. But because I was in the moment, I was able to do that.
Mm.
Has that something that you've noticed from your perspective as well? Being in the moment, you actually become more productive?
I think so. I mean, I'm trying to, yeah. It's by virtue you are fully focused. You're fully on something, aren't you? You're not
Mm,
distracted. You're not. And I think it's, as I talk about this toggling between the future and the present.
mm,
It your brain just can't cope with it, and therefore
mm,
you get distracted. I think it's I found I've become more productive when I get in the moment, and I say um, it doesn't always happen, but when it does happen and you get focused on it, you are far more productive in that sense, definitely.
mm. So it's kind of like being in the zone, I think that is the term that they use. Um,
Yeah, and it's sort of being the flow or whatever. And because people try to force that because how do you get in the flow? Well, as soon as you try and do something like that, the moment you won't do it. If you know what I mean, it goes back to striving. As soon as you strive, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
and that's where I was wondering from that perspective. You mentioned simple, and I love that because I've always been about, life is simple. It is simple. It's simple and easy. There's principles, and if you follow those principles, and the example is creating wealth. If you spend less than you earn, or earn more than you spend, which is a better way to do it, invest that money and reinvest the income. You're going to be wealthy. It's not a question. It's not a maybe. It will happen. So it's pretty simple. And then I found, I think since last time we talked, I found Confucius' quote, which he said, life is very simple, but we insist on complicating it. And do you think that it is that striving where we are actually, we're trying to force something that is just there. We, instead of complicating it, we just need to let go. And from that, when we're talking about mental strength and physical, emotional, and mental, but the emotional and mental side of things
Mm,
is letting go, and also to recognizing that we're not alone in what we're doing either. I love,
mm,
as you know, I love my pop culture references, and from Crocodile Dundee when they talk about a psychiatrist, and she says, a psychiatrist is someone that you can talk to about your problems and get them out in the open. And she goes, you probably don't have a psychiatrist to Walkabout Creek. And he goes, nah, if we have a problem, we tell Wally. Wally tells everybody else, no more problem. So do we overcomplicate it from that perspective? And we're striving and thinking that we're alone in this and we've got to project that out. But using that example of me this week, it was, this is what I'm experiencing and this is what I'm going to do. And if that's not acceptable to you, I'm okay. I'll go somewhere else and do what I need to do. But I'm not going to
mm,
try and be something I'm not, which is going to add extra stress to my life.
mm. No, I think we do put complications in our life. I don't know if it's to make us feel good, feel we're doing stuff. I think we get caught up with doing rather than being.
Mm,
Um, and I don't know, we have to do stuff. So we don't do stuff. I do a lot of stuff. You do a lot of stuff. But I'm hoping I come from a place of being as opposed to just doing. And I think, is it to justify ourselves, make us feel good? There's probably some sort of self projection of how important we are because we've got complexity. You meet those people and say, "Oh, I'm busy. I'm really busy," and that's okay. I'm busy at times, but it's not who I am. You
mm,
know, you meet those people and they're always busy or stressed. I've got a lot going on, and yeah, okay, that's fine, but it becomes who they are, and it's
yeah.
like it's good to be. Actually, I don't really share. I've got a lot. Yeah, I've got a lot going on, but I don't go around telling everybody I'm really busy. I might say, "Oh, I've got a lot going on, and yes, I'm
Mm,
trying to manage this," which is fine. That's okay. It's being real and honest with people.
yeah.
Um, but I think simplifying life is creates less stress in our lives as well. If you think about a marathon, simplistically, it's just running, isn't it? Putting your leg
Mm,
in front of the next,
yeah.
foot in front of the next. It's simplicity about.
Mm,
Yes, you need to do various things around that, but there's a simplicity about it, and I think we do complicate things, and I think then that's what causes us stress, and I think we over stretch ourselves with who we really are, and I think you talk about having people around us. It's vital to have that. Part of my networking. As much as there's a business element, actually, there's a real social thing to it as well. I
agree.
went to one the other day my intention was just to see some of my buddies. That was it. It wasn't literally. It was like, I'm gonna have some coffee with. I'm seeing them for a few weeks. We're just gonna have and I met a few other new people, but my intention was just say hello to so and so and so and so, and how are you getting on, and that being around other people who are in a similar position to me. How you going with you? How's it with you? How's work with you? How's all that sort of stuff. I think it's important to have other people around you and have that support network. And we've got good friends who we see, and some of the social aspects. Sometimes we're struggling with this at the moment. Help us with this or whatever. I think it's important to have that network around you. We are not an island. We're really not, and we're designed to be social creatures in who we are and interact with, and designed to have that support from others, in terms of that strength. It's just not about just yourself, it's strength from other people, because at times you'll find it tough. At times you'll have moments in your life where it's really hard work, and actually you need somebody else there just to shout at, rant, cry, whatever, somebody just to help you with some advice, somebody just to be there for you, just to hug you, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. I think we all need that, and I think the thinking that it's all about you and you can do it all yourself is a fallacy, and personally a weakness. It's a strength to realize that you need other people, and that goes back to that sort of vulnerability piece, isn't it? Knowing actually I need the support of others. I'm finding life difficult at the moment for whatever reason. I've had a few things dealt that are really tough, and I just need to have a beer with somebody and say, I want to moan about this, complain about this. It's really tough. And they go, yeah. And that's okay. That's fine. And, as part of...
Kind of like you got in the pre-show from me.
And then, it's, often, that's why I think coaching is really quite a powerful intervention, because not that it's not therapy or people, but I have moments with some of my clients from this week who then just ranted a bit about their last few weeks. And that's okay. It's fine. It's okay. It's a safe place. It's good. You need to rant sometimes, and you need to share those things, and then we move on from there. But we all need that support and fabric around us, definitely.
And from that as well, do we also make it a little bit more complicated by giving ourselves excuses as to why we did things rather than didn't do things rather than just owning it? I learned this from one of the programs that I have called Exceptional Effort, and there's a continuous improvement module in that. And everyone every week would have a task to do. And I had what I call the no excuse policy. So, and everyone's task was their own task. So we'd have an objective we're trying to achieve, and everyone would be, okay, I'll do this to get to there, and I'll do that to get to there. And so we'd have an assigned task and to be done by the next meeting, which was the following week. And the no excuse policy wasn't about blame or anything like that. It was just, if you didn't get the task done, you couldn't say, give an excuse as to why you didn't get it done. All you had to do was just say, all you could do is say, I didn't get it done. And I did that more for accountability, because I wanted people to own it. And then if they can't give an excuse, then it makes people more accountable. And I found from that perspective, it did improve. People didn't want to come in and say I didn't, whatever reason, they didn't want to say I didn't get it done. So I found the productivity went up. But as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, I can do this in my own life for myself personally. And what I noticed when I started doing it for myself personally, if I set an intention or something that I was going to do, it wasn't, again, no blame. If I didn't do it, I didn't give myself an excuse for not doing it, though. I just went, I didn't do it. And all of a sudden, that became freeing in and of itself. If I didn't do it, whatever reason, but I didn't make it an excuse, it was, I just didn't do it. So I it was what it was. And that became quite freeing, but also became quite motivating too, because I became very careful about what I was choosing to do to make sure that I would be able to do that. And if something came out of left field, so I wasn't telling myself, all these things I'm going to do and then not doing it. Because it doesn't, when you're talking about chemicals in your body, it doesn't feel good when we set something that we're going to do and we don't achieve it. But if we do set something we're going to do and we do achieve it, we get that dopamine and serotonin hit. and we feel good. And I found that just having that philosophy of not making an excuse, I became clearer about what I said I was going to do, but also if something didn't come out of left field, I didn't beat myself up about it as well, because I didn't try to justify why it didn't happen. It just became, well, it didn't happen. And that became a really freeing thing from my perspective. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, have you experienced something like that as well?
No, it's interesting. I found that really quite powerful, actually. I'm just thinking of, I like that, the fact that you either say yes or no. Did you achieve something? Yes, I did. No, I didn't.
Mm.
And what I like about that, I was just thinking how I feel when I just thinking of examples in my head. But saying no, it just sits with you, doesn't it? It stays there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's pinned to you. It's powerful, because often we go, it didn't happen. I'm not saying we don't learn and get feedback from why something didn't happen, but if we didn't take action on something, yes, there might be some wisdom for whatever reason that happened and we learn, but by justifying it, we step away from it and we put it to a distance.
Yeah.
And I think there's something powerful by saying, and they say in a group saying, did you achieve that, Damon? Yes, I did. Did you? No. And it's like,
and you can't say anything else. It's like,
okay, fine. Next, and so, and I think there's some power of that accountability, and I think to do it to yourself, is incredible. Really, I think some real power. I like that. I really like that. That's something. I need to think a bit more about that. Why that's so powerful? But it just, I love it. It just sits pinned to you. No. That's it.
Well, from my perspective, what I found when I did that, when I applied it to myself, because I saw the productivity difference that it made with organizations, with people in organizations. But when I did it to myself, it was almost a peace thing. It was, okay, I didn't do it. And it wasn't, but the condition was, blame yourself either. It's, no, I didn't do it. And it was, okay, it's not why or whatever. I didn't do it. Now, what am I going to do? Well, I want to achieve it, so I'm going to take this action now. And I found in those moments, I would actually find myself even more motivated before I got there, because I knew I couldn't say, I'm not going to, not that I really had a lot of, it must be done by this certain time, but it was in the moment I would be, again, you talked about being in the moment. In the moment, I would be knowing that I can't give an excuse for not getting this done. So am I going to binge watch something, or am I going to do it? I can't give an excuse. It's not like, well, that episode was so great, I had to watch it, or so I had to do this. It was, okay, I'm not distracting myself with that busy work that we get distracted by. Whatever pops up on YouTube or whatever, it's, I'm going to do this because I can't use that as an excuse that this was an exciting thing. And it just changed my own productivity, but also the peace that I felt when we're talking about, again, mental and emotional strength. It gave me so much strength in that moment to say, I'm just going to do it now.
But it also it takes the emotion out of it as well, I think. And it's almost like a flow diagram. Did you do this? Yes. Great. Tick. No. Okay. What do I do next then? And you flow down to it. So then it keeps you, rather than, if you then justify excuse, you end up probably not even doing it. And then you detach yourself from it, and then it never gets done. So actually go, no, what do I do next? I need to do this to do it. And then did I do it? Yes or no? Yes, I've done it now. And then, so it keeps you moving forward rather than dwelling back in the past, doesn't it? Of what you should have done.
Oh, I hadn't thought that through. Yeah. You're not thinking about the past and giving yourself reasons to why it. It's just that moment, like you see, you're vulcanizing it, taking the emotion out of it. I just watched Star Trek, so
I should get some ears put on.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I know you've got to go because you've got something on, and same from my perspective as well, because we're getting close to the hour now. To the top of the hour. But Julian, what from that perspective, is there something that really come out of this from your end as to, if we're going to leave it for the people that are listening, that they should take away about, in the strength of mental, physical, and emotional?
I think for me, it's a daily practice of something, whether that's your gratitude or your mindfulness. It's creating a core strength, a core mental strength, a core emotional strength, and that's through a daily activity, a daily sort of ritual practice, however you want to call it, habits. You know, and I think that's the thing. See it as that, because fact of life will always throw you things that you weren't expecting, and it doesn't mean you won't get knocked over still, but it means you'll be able to cope with things. And then, as we talked about that, you know, how people around you, again, that's important. That sort of framework of people who are there for you and sort of to help support you. And I love that last bit we just talked about, the whole you know, owning things you're doing, yes or no. I just love that. That's maybe
no excuse policy.
No excuse policy. I love that. That's powerful in terms of more power. I need to think a bit more about that. I like that. Thank you for that.
I'll give you. I'll write it up and send it. Here is a no excuse policy. Julian, it's always wonderful chatting with you. Thank you very much for sharing. I've learned a lot from this, and I've taken so much away from it about being in the moment, and really having that focus right here and doing what you need to be doing. So thank you for, again, taking the time, and I always love chatting with you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, Damian. I love your insightful questions. It always makes me think, and every time I go away, I need to think a bit more about that. So it's becoming a real think tank for me, these moments of talking out with you. Thank you.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.